My name is Nancy Roberts, and I'm an economics professor at Arizona State University. We have talked about elasticity in general, and what I would like to do now is use an example and show how we actually measure elasticity, and then interpret what we found, because often what we end up doing is punching numbers into a calculator, come up with a number, and we don't have any idea what we found. So what I want to do today is use an example and explain what this elasticity measure means. So, the way we measure elasticity, how sensitive, for example, demand, we're going to do elasticity of demand, how sensitive is demand to changes in price? We have what we call the coefficient on elasticity of demand. And the formula is the percentage change in quantity demanded that comes about because there's some percentage change in price. So we already know that. If price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. The question is, by how much will quantity demanded change when price changes? And you will notice that this is a relative measure. This isn't slope. This is a relative measure. So we're measuring percentages. We can take this formula and break it down into something that's really easy to use. And so let me just run through the arithmetic really quickly. You will remember that the percentage change in quantity demanded is just, it can be rewritten as the change in quantity demanded over quantity demanded. That's just that. And the percentage change in price can be written as the change in price over price. So I've just rewritten this. Now you can do the flip over rule. P over Q dQ dP. So this is just that. And so this actually is the formula that we use to calculate elasticity of demand. So let's just say we have a demand curve and we're thinking of raising price. You're a producer, you're thinking of raising price, and you of course would like to know what's going to happen to the quantity demanded if I raise the price. So let's just say the current price is $1.80, and you, the producer, would like to raise the price to $2. That's a thought. And if we were to draw the demand curve, let's just indicate the two quantities at these two prices. At price 1, the quantity demanded is 12, and at price 2, the quantity demanded is 10. So if we had a demand curve that indicated these prices and quantities, then all we have to do is plug it into this formula, and we have a measure of elasticity of demand. Now, in an introductory economics class, we are going to stick to linear demand curves. And so when we look at this formula, it's easy to determine what the change in the quantity demanded was. We see it. It's easy to determine what the change in price is. We see it. But the question is, what price are we going to use? And what quantity are we going to use? Are we going to use P1 or P2? Are we going to use Q1 or Q2? And so what we do in principles is we use what we call the midpoint formula. So we're actually going to measure elasticity at the midpoint between this price and this quantity. And so this P becomes P1 plus P2 over 2. And so that is 180 plus $2 over 2. That's P. What's Q? Q is the same. It's Q1 plus Q2 over 2. So 12 plus 10 over 2. So now we've dealt with this. What's the change? So we're going to multiply that. What's the change in quantity demanded? The change in quantity demanded is 2, a negative 2. And This negative sign is very important, by the way, because quantity demanded has decreased. So the change is a -2. And the change in price is a plus 20 cents. So then, da-da-da-da-da-da, and this turns out to be, so our coefficient on elasticity of demand is minus 1.73. So we have measured, there's my demand curve, we have actually measured price elasticity at a quantity of 11 and a price of $1.90. We've actually measured elasticity right there. And what we've come up with is that elasticity at this price and output combination is minus 1.73. Well, what does that mean? What does 1.73 mean? And so if you go back to your original formula, what we're actually measuring, minus 1.73 equals the percentage change in quantity demanded that comes about with a percentage change in price. Okay, so minus 1.73 is exactly the same thing as minus 1.73 over 1, right? So what we're saying is a 1% change in price will lead to a minus 1.73% change in quantity demanded. So what this is saying is, if you change price by 1%, you're going to get more than a 1% response in the change in quantity demanded. You're going to get a 1.73% change in quantity demanded, and obviously in the negative direction. And so what that tells us is that demand is relatively elastic. If this had been less than, what if the number, instead of being minus 1.73, if these numbers had been different and my measure was minus 0.8, if we'd had different numbers and it came out to be minus 0.8, that would say that a 1% increase in price will lead to an 0.8% decrease in quantity demanded. So the response in quantity demanded would be less than the increase in price, and we would say that demand is relatively inelastic. And so that's the way that we measure price elasticity of demand, how responsive demand is to changes in price. The next video I'll talk about price elasticity of supply.